Welcome to the Avro Heritage Museum podcast.
Welcome again to the Avro Heritage Museum podcast for part 2 of my conversation with Avro doyen John Nicol. At the end of episode 1, change was imminent. The move from the factory on Greengate in Chadderton, 20 miles or so south to rural Cheshire. Today, John recalls the excitement, having worked on parts of aircraft, to seeing them fully assembled and flying. He tells us about his work on Nimrods, 146s and ATPs, and he recalls an unexpected use for the linen drawing sheets on which aircraft were once designed using pencils, not computers.
That was a big move. There were, about 250 draftsmen? There were all the design engineers, there was stress, initial project, planning, all sorts of people.
And why did they do that?
Well, at that time, there was a design organisation at Woodford, but the weapons division had moved out and got scattered to different places. And I remember the first office that we moved into, I think I was told had previously been a machine shop for weapons division. I remember it had a very nice parquet floor. But however, we got settled and over the years moved around about different drawing offices, the shufflers about. Of course, living on the north side of Manchester, there was a lot of travelling involved. Unfortunately, I could get a lift with people who lived that not far away. I remember there was Cliff Hall, he lived up in Haywood, and he used to drive past, pick me up, and that was it. And it wasn't until I got a car on my own a few years later that I then did some car sharing with a couple of other people, and we just took a week each, and we had a permanent passenger, so there was a bit of income from that. And I think also we were given, because of the move, we were given travel time and some travel expenses for a period of time because of the move down to Woodford. But coming down to Woodford, goodness gracious, it was like all your Christmases and birthdays coming at once. I mean, having seen bits of aircraft, my only previous experience with Woodford was the model aircraft rallies, which we used to come to once a year, and you just saw the odd aircraft on the airfield, and that was it. But then to see it, and then to see planes flying, I mean,
As you say,
it was bits,
quite small bits.
Yep, came down, put together, and off they went. And it was.
I guess also
brilliant.
it would have been seemed pretty rural here, wouldn't it, compared with?
Well, yes, certainly compared with Greengate, yes, it was, yes, and you had the outlook to the hills, the Derbyshire Hills, and vast open spaces compared with Chadderton. I mean, Chadderton was hectic, as you can imagine, and what they couldn't do at Chadderton wasn't worth talking about. All the different facilities they had there, and in fact, I mean, okay, I'm just rewinding a little bit, but I mean, for example, at Chadderton, the heavy press department, they were making parts of commercial vehicle bodies. I think, for one thing, for a company called Dennis, who were big vehicle manufacturers. And I think they were doing cabs or something like that. They also, at one stage, got involved with some transit system in Japan, some railway system to do possibly with the carriages. Also, because of the expertise in fiberglass, because of course they were making radomes and goodness knows what and other things. They, I gather, were making some yacht hulls as well. So, the range of departments at Chadderton, also in the process department. Now, I'll just say a little bit about the process department. And that was 1963. And I was put with a guy called Martin Holbrook. Nice chap. And he was very interested in gliding, as indeed I did quite a bit of gliding at Woodford. And one of my apprentice friends was the son of Maurice Brennan. And Maurice Brennan joined in 1961, and he'd had quite a distinguished career prior to that at various aircraft companies, including Weybridge, and had done some work with Barnes-Wallis, in fact, at Weybridge. Anyway, Maurice Brennan, and he had two sons, came up, lived near Bramall, and I just happened to say to Martin Holbrook, who was working with in process, we're just going down to see Maurice Brennan's place with a couple of his sons and one of my other friends. Oh, are you? He says, oh, right, he said, I've got an idea. He said, I've had this plan in my head about whether the company could build gliders using honeycomb. He said, would you like to take this drawing with you and have a word with Maurice Brent when you get down there? Well, to be honest, I bottled out on that one. That was, that was completely out of my league. But no, that was Maurice Brent, and he became director and chief engineer, involved with the 748, and he got involved with Nimrod and so on. And then eventually he moved on some years later. And to see, aircraft complete and flying out was brilliant. And at that time, 65, well, of course, 748s were on the line. I think there was maybe the odd Shackleton might have come back for some work. There might even have been the odd Vulcan around about then. I'm not 100% sure. But yes, I was in the drawing of on hydraulics. And I suppose mid-60s, 66 perhaps, 66, 67, we started on the Nimrod, Mark 1 Nimrod. And so I was very much involved with the hydraulic system in the Bombay, the pannier. Did all the piping there, operating the doors, fore and aft doors, and various other things. And then following on from that, similarly, the next Nimrod project was the Nimrod R1, of which they built 3. This was a special
secret ones, yeah.
Yeah, and again involved there with the hydraulic system for the spinning aerials, which were in the panniers. And this was a Ferranti system, and that was basically, they were whizzing round and just listening for any broadcast, shall we say, in that sort of spectrum, and recording all this information, which would then get passed on to the intelligence people.
And they had guys who could speak the languages, didn't they?
There was that, yes. Yes, if it was voice transmissions, for sure, yeah. But there was also things, I suppose, picking up radar, all sorts of things. Anything. Absolutely, yes. And as I say, a lot of it was going to GCHQ and places like that. Now, interestingly, that hydraulic system for the spinning aerials was it was a Ferranti system. It was a totally different setup to the hydraulic system on the aircraft. Historically, Nimrod used what the Comet had used, hydraulics. They used what they call Lockheed 22, a particular type of hydraulic fluid. But the Ferranti system, they used DTD 585, which was a traditional, quite common, it was used on the 748 and so on, hydraulic fluid. So I did the drawings for this hydraulic pack in the centre of the lower part of the pannier, below the fuselage, which had all the pumps, the filters, cooling fans, reservoirs, valves, everything. So I did a lot, on those systems.
You mentioned the drawings there, John. I mean, are we completely pre-digital, or is anything that there's nothing on the horizon at that point?
Not at that time, no. No, it was pencil. Ultimately, we did get on to going away from graphite pencils onto washable, and it was more of more like a waxy type pencil. I know they're all given E numbers, E1, E2, whereas you used to have F and H for normal pencils, whether it be hard, those sort of typical things. But we had the drawing material was linen with a coating on it. And ultimately, right, there was a secondary use for those. When they were throwing these drawings out, and I'm now talking early 90s, there were certain drawings being thrown out that might have been copied in a more permanent manner. Because bear in mind, we also had tracers who would do ink versions of some of these things, and they did beautiful jobs. And in fact, going back to the earlier Chadderton days, the tracers there were 2 tracers particularly, they used to appear on top of the pops on the television when it was broadcast from Manchester, when in the audience, dancing around, yeah. However, but what we found with these drawing sheets was that if you got a bowl of really, really hot water and put the drawing in and let it soak for a bit, the sort of coating, together with the inked drawings, almost floated off, right? And you eventually got down to the Irish linen, okay? And you rinsed and rinsed and rinsed, and you got fresh water until eventually you had this sheet. And I've still got about a dozen of these at home, right? After all these years. And they're brilliant posters. They're brilliant. Quality stuff it was. Yeah, a secondary use. Now, I'd left in 1974 for about 2.5 years, but I won't go into the details of that. I wasn't in prison. It's okay. But I came back. I was drawn back. I got myself back onto the drawing board. The same group I'd previously been on, which was nice. And in fact, over in what we called E Block, which was a drawing office overlooking the airfield. And it was called E Block because it was the shape of an E, funnily enough. But you looked straight onto the airfield. So, I mean, that was brilliant. I mean,
from where we are now, John, where would
right?
Be?
How can I say now? It was.
Or imagine from the museum, if we stand at the entrance of the museum looking outwards.
No, looking from the entrance of the museum, you're looking south. I think you'd have to look northwest pretty well. So up towards what would be the entrances to the whole site, more or less, and the factory straddled, shall we say, across where we traditionally come in onto the site with the houses, and there is the other entrance, of course, further along. So if you sort of move in from that, in parallel with the main road was the new assembly, as we called it. On the airfield side of that was E Block, a standalone drawing office. So if you were in there, there was nothing obscuring your view.
Oh, fantastic.
And that was really, I think they should have paid us less to work in there. The view was so good. And then as time moved on, there was the AEW Nimrod. Well, that got the chop anyway. And then I suppose the next thing, there's the 146, which essentially was a Hatfield project, but Woodford did quite a bit of design work, and Chadderton did the rear part of the fuselage. And until ultimately, when Hatfield was closed, the whole thing was moved up to Woodford. So, the complete assembly of the aircraft. Of course, the 146 was spread around because Filton were building the main centre part of the fuselage. I think the wings were done at Avro Aerostructures, was it, in America? Parts were made by Saab.
They all came here for us.
They all came here, yes. And the engines came over from America. So, yes, worked on some of the design work on the 146. I think the one bit you could see that I was involved with was the air intake to the auxiliary power unit, which was on the back end of the fuselage on the port side. You just see it as a whole, but that was my bit. And the duct that fed down to the APU. I did other things besides. And then the ATP, Advanced Turboprop, was involved quite a bit with the bleed air system in the nacelle from the engine that fed the environmental control system, the conditioning packs under the floor, and various other things we did. And it would have been around about 1970-ish, I think. We did some drawing work on the Airbus A300. Now, Hatfield were involved with that. I think they may have done the wing design work and shipped out some of the associated stuff up to Woodford. So I think my involvement was just some brackets and things on the rear spar for hydraulic system. But I do remember we had to do the drawings all in metric, which was interesting. Well, yeah, and I guess it was agreed across the whole project that everything would be done at metric. So also, I think around about 1970, of course, the Victor tanker. And when Handley Page went out of business, Woodford, Manchester factories took the responsibility for the K2, so the conversion of the B2 bombers into tankers. And at that point, I was working in what was known as DO1, which overlooked the main road at the front, quite high up there. And on the fuel system along the leading edge, I do remember. And that would be about 1970, 71.
When we had the centenary of Woodford last September, because I spoke then to quite a few apprentices from, some of them from your era, some of them from before, actually. And what came across, and it comes across with you, is just their enjoyment in coming to work. Because like you, they were saying, gosh, all these aircraft, I couldn't believe it. I came to work and they were...
Because of you were interested.
Yeah,
I mean, okay, there might be some people, it was just a job. But there was a lot of us who, that was our life, really. And going to work wasn't a pain. It was a pleasure, absolutely. And and when you think about all the characters as well in the places and nicknames, there were a few nicknames going on. I mean, I remember one guy like Cherokee, right? Now, I think he must have had a little bit of a look of a Red Indian, I think. But, well, anyway, he got that name for some reason. There was the Bengal Bandit, right? Now, he used to pressure test ducting and pipes and things like that. I'm not quite sure where that came from. There was was it the Green Mamba? He was an inspector. There was Swivelhead. This was in the offices because he used to, stood there. So I was thinking, what's everybody doing? I won't name names. And there was all sorts of facilities, guys on the shop floor. You're servicing your car. Right, there's somebody. Right, go and see such and such. Yeah, I'll have a gallon of Duckham's 2050, please. Right.
Oh, I don't know.
Right, yeah. And so, I better have some spark plugs as well, right? Because you'd fix your own car in those days. And there was another guy who sold commercial quantities packs of aluminium foil that they'd use in restaurants and things like that, and possibly cling film as well. And you got oh yeah, okay. I think he was one of the welders actually. You can't get in trouble now; it's too late.
Yeah. We hope that you'll join us for the third and final part of my conversation with John when we move on to a very different era, the 1980s. Don't forget, if you click the follow button on your podcast device and enable push notifications, you should be alerted when a new episode is available. In the meantime, it's goodbye from me, Chris Bezic, and keep listening.
Make sure you follow us in your podcast app to ensure that you don't miss out on future episodes.